With over 60% of Africa's population under the age of 25, its youthful population is not just a statistic, it is a force for the African continent. A force with the potential to redefine economies, reshape societies and reclaim Africa's economic destiny. But here's a big question on today's edition of Talking Point. Is this youthful energy being harnessed, or is it being wasted within the context of the African continent? Are we preparing Africa's young people to become job seekers or job creators, change passengers or change drivers? Today we ask, can youth power truly be a catalyst for Africa's economic freedom, or will it remain an untapped resource bursting with potential yet blocked by systematic barriers? Join us on today's edition of Talking Point as we unpack numerous possibilities, the pitfalls and chart the way forward for the African continent right here on Talking Point. This is your Pan-African television. To stay with us. Hello dear audience, so for you Media Africa, it was a pleasure to be in your company over your Pan-African channel. This day on Talking Point, we shall be evoking the role of the youth across the African continent in championing economic freedom across Africa. As well, noting that this comes amidst numerous debates and conversation where African leaders, especially the youth, have been called to take part in channeling change across the African continent. Well, to discuss this very important topic this day, before we reiterate that you've been listening to us over the airways of FM 96.3 for you radio. We've been joined this day by Mr. Eddie D. JARWOLO, the president of NAMOD Partners for Democratic Development and the executive director of the Young Political Leadership School Africa. He joined us all the way from Liberia. Thank you, Ms. Lisha, for joining us this day.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful work you do, and thank you for the platform. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on your very distinct platform today.
It's a pleasure to have you on board. We just got indications that Mr. FABRICE LENA joined us all the way here from Cameroon in his capacity as a political leader and, of course, the frontline runner for the Now Future movement. He's equally an entrepreneur. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I'm glad to be your guest for this program. I'm looking forward to sharing my experience and also giving my contribution to shaping the narrative of our continent. We have just the golden African continent, and we must do everything to make sure it is what we want and is how we want it to be. Thank you for having me as your guest.
It's always a pleasure having you on board. And now, to kickstart today's conversation, meanwhile, I'd like to reiterate, Mr. Lena, please could you put your camera on landscape mode so you could view the screen from this end. Now, to debut the conversation, a very important one in shaping the narrative across the African continent. I'm going to kickstart with you, Mr. JARWOLO. Now, have a listen to your co-panelists. Like the topic depicts, it's the role of the youth in shaping, the economic independence of the African continent. Now, my first question will be, what does economic freedom mean on the African continent, mean in this context of Africa, especially at a time when we have numerous youths that are being regarded as being at the center of this drive?
Well, I think it's an generation of young people coming up, and that opportunity needs to be supported by our leaders on the continent. If you participate in political activity, you see that in my country, about 55% of the voting population are young people, but they are the more rejected and neglected generation in my country. If you look at the ECOWAS region, young people are the leading force in terms of organizing at the community level, the social media black hole. They are the one that do all the work to make sure that the government work for the people, but you don't feed their impact into the economic process of the country, because our economic growth and development, our natural resources are basically being managed by people from outside, involved with politicians who are involved into illicit money, corruption, mismanagement, a lot of negative things that young people are not benefiting. So what we need to do is to build a new generation of young leaders, and that's where I come in with the young political leadership school Africa. We need a new we need to reset Africa with a new mindset and a new code to give young people the voice, the power, the opportunity, the number to make sure that Africa economic growth is led by them because they are the assets for Africa development.
Yeah, Mr. JARWOLO, for that brilliant introduction. Now, to continue with you, Mr. LENA, you listened to your co-panelist, and he evoked the issue of a change of mindset on the African continent. I think that is a point that resonates with numerous pundits across the African continent when it comes to this ideal or ideology of economic independence within the context of the African continent. Now, Africa has been termed by numerous, external entities as a youngest continent, or continent with the youngest population. Now, you are not just a political figure within the Cameroon landscape, you are equally an entrepreneur. Now, from your perspective, when you look at the landscape across Africa, do we think or do you believe that this fact that Africa has a young population should be taken to the advantage of the African continent, or it's gradually becoming some sort of liability within the context of Africa?
The youthfulness of the continent is a profit, it is gain, it's a resource for the continent, it's not a liability. It is a resource, a very huge resource, because we are dealing with a population that have everything. I mean, the human resource and the capacity to cover the labor market that is much needed by the continent. So we can say that the youthfulness of the continent is a liability. It is rather a resource. From the perspective of Cameroon, you will realize that these young people have the potential to make the country to bloom, but only have systematic obstructions and gerontocratic leaders that will not permit these young people to exercise their talent, their potentials, and the capacity for them to transform their economies, to make contributions that could shape both entrepreneurial and political policies. So the youth power is a very important aspect when you look across the continent right now. But let's not think, especially as the young people, that the only way to make it is to take the Mediterranean route, or to go to Europe, or to go to other countries that are already established. Ask yourself the question, who are the people who fought for these countries to be established? Who are the people who fought for these continents to be established? There were also young people at a certain generation that said, well, we don't have to give up, but we have to fight in order that some other people will envy to come to our place someday. This is the premises we should establish for the young continent and the young people constituting the largest chunk of the population of this continent. So my perspective and belief is that young people can make it up. Young people can always be at that point where they are being relied upon. The young people themselves, need to be conscious, and they must blend the two important things that is needed for us to grow faster: political consciousness and economic capacity. The political consciousness here is the ideologies that each country define and blend it to the perspective of the continental collective interests. And the economic capacity is the resources given to us by God, the human resource of our talents that we have in the cultural sector, in the sports sector, in our natural resource sector, that we could harness in order to build our continent. So, of course, myself, I always tell young people, I have a grass to grace story to tell. And we must not necessarily come from well-to-do background in order to make a difference. You can set up your mind and put some goals and stay with some values and push ahead and inculcate those principles that can lead you to be a typical example in your community. Because being an example is, first of all, the prerequisite to give lesson to other people.
Thank you, Mansley. Mr. LENA, now, given the point that we're talking about economic freedom on the African continent, I'll get back to you. Mr. JARWOLO, I mentioned at the start of this program that you are the Executive Director of the Young Political Leadership School for Africa. You train or you bring together young leaders from across the African continent to talk about leadership, governance amidst others. Looking at the education system, because if we are talking about economic freedom, I think it boils down to us, recycling our education system. Now, from this perspective, our African education system equipping young people with the skill sets that are needed in this 21st century economies, from your perspective?
So our educational system, for me, speaking from Liberia background, is mostly copied in from the European or the American. Our educational system is directly copied after the American. And normally we talk about the different civic skills, the different technology, all those, they all copied from the West. So how do we develop an Africa type of educational system? I will look at the African value, the African system, and the African culture.
True.
And I think Africa is not poor. Africa is just poorly managed. So our education system needs to teach us how do we develop our generation, the new generation, your generation, to ensure that the resources of the continent is properly managed for the benefit of the people on the continent. Because our educational system is not properly grown up to with a value system, that's why you see more people in our system are corrupt. We have a very corrupt system in Liberia. I mean, I don't know what all African look at, but our leaders are very corrupt. We had a conflict that led to almost 20 years of war that killed 250,000 persons only because of misunderstanding and rampant corruption. After that, we have spent like 20 years of peace. The corruption is still there. So our thought now with the young political leaders in school, how do we prepare a new generation of young people that will be more in the interest of the continent, in the interest of the citizens, and that will manage the resources for the benefit of those who live in the country. And I think that's what we need to focus on. If you look at the African Union, how many young people do you see there? If you look at even the ECOWAS, or called the Economic Community of West African States, they are all former politicians. You don't find space for young people. Young people are basically used as interns. But there are young people with the skills and knowledge and the capacity to contribute more than just intern. How do we develop a program that will integrate young people's interests and give them the opportunity to use their talent, their normal skills to make sure that Africa can be the country they want to live? If you have the opportunity today to tell Liberian youth whether they want to leave to go to Europe or America, Liberia will be part of entrepreneur because they don't see opportunities in the country. They are only used during campaign time. Right after election, they are done. They are not considered. So our educational system had to be developed in a way that will add some value, that will make sure that people who go to school acquire the knowledge and skills are given job. You're not just given job because you're a member of the political party. You should be given job because you're competent, you're qualified, and you have something to add value to the country economic development. And that's what I think we should do. So that would require a new mindset, a new thinking. And I really think that the current generation of leaders across Africa don't have the knowledge, the capacity, and that passion to transform young people into the assets that we need that can make Africa better. So I also think that the young people of Africa have an opportunity, the opportunity of a generation that have been blessed with technology. Today, I sit in Liberia and communicate with you in Cameroon. How are young people using technology to add value to their life? Not to be used by politicians, but to be able to invest and develop something that they can live on and they can contribute on. And they can be able to take leadership role at the community level, at the local government level, at the national level, and become that agent that people will reference, say, look at this guy. Like today, everybody in West Africa, we're talking about the president of Burkina Faso, a young person who is making too much change. If you see some of the things on social media about what happened in Burkina Faso, it's like, is it real or is it fake? But it's real. A one man who came with a vision to develop a country, went against all the odds, and decided to say, I will work with my people, I will make economic development strong. And he invested in the agriculture, he invested in the technology, invested in the education, and you see that Burkina Faso in less than 3 years is making heavy more than some of the countries that had democracy for a very long period of time. So I think there's still an opportunity that young people need to sit and reflect and see what is it they want how they can make an impact into the continent and not just they live in the country. And our educational system should reflect our value system.
Exactly. The education system on the African continent should definitely reflect the values of Africans. Now, back to you, Mr. LENA. You listened to your co-panelist, and he cited that youth on the African continent are potential and not tapped fully or efficiently to drive change on the African continent. And he cited, you know, a nation like Burkina Faso, where we're seeing so much change being, you know, occurring in that part of West Africa. From your perspective, do you share some opinion as your co-panelist as far as that's concerned? Please, could you unmute your mic? We can get what you're saying, sir.
Can you hear me now? So
yes,
I'm saying that I appreciate what is happening in Burkina Faso. And of course, the young president, they're showing to the world that young people can do it. It's not about the age, but it's about the commitment to your country. It's about the commitment to your people. It's about establishing a different kind of state-citizen relationship. It's about establishing new order, a disruptive order that is not common in what we know of recent history. So it's a great thing that he is doing in Burkina Faso. However, we are concerned about the sustainability of this. We are also concerned about the continuity, because Burkina Faso is one particular country in the continent that have seen the rise of great leaders and then cut short with their visions. And we hope that the young people of this country and those in the neighboring countries can understand the trajectory of this historical past and contemporary realities to be able to protect this young man, to be able to protect those who
Mr. LENA, are you with us? I guess we're losing you because of the connectivity issues, but hopefully you're going to connect back and continue with this great conversation. Now, to proceed with you, Mr. JARWOLO, your co-panelist, was stating that we have this issue of sustainability, you know, on the African continent, especially in nations like you cited earlier on Burkina Faso. What do you have to say? And in cases like that, you know, within the context of Africa, how can that be overturned so that youth leaders on the African continent can effectively participate in driving change, you know, across Africa?
The major issue there is to set up a system. Set up a system, and the system should be responsive and receptive to the new generation. I think if the system is set up and people are taught based on the system they wanted to use, that would be a kind of culture and where everybody come in to work in the system. I think that would be a very important point to do. But a lot of young people in West Africa see Burkina Faso leader as a model of somebody who would want to follow. And I think that we all pray that he live long, that he set up a system, and that system can resonate across the country. And whoever come to replace him, they will work within the system. One of the things I feel in more African countries, there's no system. If one political party come to power, they stay for a long time. If they leave, the new government come with a new system. We need to have a system that is transparent, that is accountable, a system that is accessible, a system that is responsive to the need and the interest of the citizen. So I think that's one thing. Burkina Faso is a very good example of young leaders, and we all are very proud of him, and we hope that in as much as he is a military leader, and we are Democrat, we don't support military takeover, but his leadership are proving to many young people that regardless of who you are, it's about serving your people, and that's leadership. And we are so proud that we can have such a young person on the continent that is making a very huge difference, and a lot of people appreciate what he does.
Thank you immensely. Now, moving forward, as we mentioned, you said young leaders can drive change across Africa. So, Mr. JARWOLO, from your perspective, how can we shift from producing job seekers on the African continent to empowering young job creators? Because I remember Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana once said, before Africa can dream of true freedom, they should be able to, anticipate of getting economic freedom first, economic independence. So from your perspective, how can Africa, move in that light?
It's that the economic freedom shouldn't be determined by politicians. More politicians want to control the economy of the state, and opposition that have the space to survive. So the marginalized opposition, I think we should have a leader in Africa that will open economic opportunity for everybody, regardless of whether you're opposition or not. As far as you are investing into your country and creating jobs, and you involve into economic activity, and your people can live a better life, the government should support that. I think government should also be able to make sure that the resources of the country is properly negotiated. In most of the country, like for me in Liberia, we have diamond, we have gold, we have all the resources. Guess what? It's only 10% that come to my country. 90% go to people from Europe, either Great Britain, either from the UK or the American company. Whenever the government wants to discuss on a 50-50 win-win position, that government is either overthrown or that government is labeled as undemocratic. They were automatic. So Africa has to stand to make sure that they add value to their resources and make sure that we open factories. I don't know how many African in my country. I don't know how many. I'm not sure we even have a factory there. We need to make sure that our resources are kept in Africa. They are produced in Africa, and they are shipped on our side with value. We don't just take our raw diamond and ship it to Europe. We don't just take our iron ore and ship it to Europe. We should use our resources, add value, so we can create jobs and innovation from young people can add value to the resources we have. Come back to the DR Congo. I already read about the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I was surprised to see the resources in our country. But for many years, there's no peace. Who fighting? The young people. Who giving them the arm? The old people. Who are benefiting from the resources? The white people. So why can't Africa come together and see how they can find a lasting and sustainable peace in the DR Congo so that the resources down there can benefit the people and they can start suffering and dying? And so pitiful to see youth, women, and children suffer so much in the hand of their brothers and sisters, only to realize that the resources in our country are going to benefit other different countries. So it's a lot we need to do. For me, the mindset had to be changed. The law for Africa had to come up first. We need to preach more patriotism into the young people. Our educational system need to speak about value, patriotism, nationalism, all the positive things. We need to talk the positive about Africa. We need to say how our leaders can love Africa, they can invest in Africa, that more people, whether they are politicians or not, will benefit from the resources, and there can be economic freedom, and there can be security for everyone. I think that's what we should focus on, right?
Thank you so much. We'll be coming back to the aspect of security, which you mentioned earlier on. But in your previous response, you cited that Africans need to add value to their resources. And just recently, we saw Ivory Coast that was saying they're going to raise the prices of, cocoa within their countries in reaction to the U.S. tariffs. Now, away from that, back on the topic of discussion for today, you mentioned something about African youths coming together to champion change for economic freedom, economic independence. Now, do you believe that unity amongst African youths could go a long way in amplifying this vision of a new currency on the African continent, one that is going to totally liberate the African continent at the economic front?
Sure, and how to do that? We need to make sure that African youth are part of decision making. You can't keep them at the back. So if they made a decision we made in Parliament, how many young people in Parliament?
True.
If they made a decision, we made at the local assembly, how many young people sitting in a local assembly? The young people have to be at the decision making table to make sure they bring out the best idea, the innovation, the creativity, to make sure that we can benefit from the resources of our continent. But if you leave young people from the back, I mean, they're not on the table. They will just be there to validate policies that they had no idea how it was crafted. And that's the issue we're having in many African countries.
So a sector like agriculture, do you think that more youth getting into the sector could go a long way in driving this economic liberation we are expecting, across Africa? And what role can the African continental free trade area go a long way in amplifying this vision?
So Africa is one country that plays with a lot of free land. We have so much we can produce in Africa.
True.
But I'm not saying the Africa agenda focusing on agriculture. I'm not saying that. What is the roadmap for agriculture? If you depend the roadmap in agriculture, what value added do you want? If you get the value added, then what role can the women you play? Then not just you, but women. Women play a very important role. In my country, we have so many land. We keep talking about agriculture, but the budget for agriculture is less than 10%. The budget for people in parliament, they are almost like 40%. The budget for people for education and healthcare, they are less than the budget for people in parliament. They are less than the budget for people on the judiciary and the presidential. So we need to make sure that leadership transcends not just benefiting few people, but investing into something that will add value. I think agriculture will add value to Africa. We need to open factory that we can manufacture and ship to all the European countries. We can't always take our resources and get it to foreign countries. We have to learn how to promote. In Burkina Faso, you can see tomatoes, you see plum. What a factory do we have to produce? How do we add value to so we ship and other people can in Europe and other countries can start to use our juices, get our fufu, our plantain, something different that can add value and create job. Agriculture will create a lot of jobs if we invest in agriculture. It had to be very sincere. People have to be very weird about it. It had to come from the politicians. Because if they're allocating money in the national budget, you cannot be allocating 5% of your national budget for agriculture. It's not making nothing. We need to say, look, let invest 25%, let invest 30% in agriculture. And that agriculture that will add value. If you want to come and open mining company in my country, you want to produce gold, how do you add value to the gold? If you want to come and open, you want to iron ore, well, how do you add value to iron ore in my country? You don't just take it away. If you come in my country to pick a log, how do you add value to produce timber? I mean, different things we can do. Africa has to say, maybe the African Union, the ECOWAS to say, let's develop an economic program, economic policy that will be inclusive of the African value.
And that is true. It's very imperative for, the bodies within the African continent to harness the values and, of course, portray the values of Africans to the rest of the world. And like you said, Mr. JARWOLO, when most of these products within the context of from the African continent go out there and they are being processed into finished products, when they come back, they haven't been sold to Africans who turn out to be the consumers at the end. Very much exorbitant or very expensive prices. Now, if you are with us, I'd like to proceed from where you stopped. What role, how can we, harness digital tools in a bit to, unlock this youth potential across the African continent, one that is going to benefit Africa and go a long way in championing for this change of narrative, change of mindset, and so on and so forth? Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, we are talking about how the youth power on the African continent can go a long way in, championing for economic freedom, economic independence on the African continent. A conversation that comes just at the right time when the African continent is having numerous debates about the youth taking actively or partaking actively in narrative change across the continent of Africa. Of course, our guest for today, Mr. JARWOLO, who is joining us all the way from Liberia, and is the executive director of the Young Political Leadership School in that part of West Africa, was stating during his previous response that it's imperative for African leaders to amplify or develop more, invest in the youth of the African continent so they can be able to reset Africa, they can be able to change the mindset, they can be able to power the African continent from numerous or diverse perspectives. We had Fabrice LENA, a political leader from Cameroon, that from his perspective stated that youth should not just, drive change, but they should be actively engaged in various sectors as well as the political narrative of the African continent, because from that sphere they can be able to champion this change which we are hoping for on the African continent. So I was about asking the guests how African youths could use digital tools as well as technology in unlocking this untapped potential for the development, especially as far as economic freedom is concerned within this context, the model and Africa. If Mr. JARWOLO is with us, sir, can you join us? Are you with us? Mr. JARWOLO, are you on board? All right, so we are hoping that we shall be able to continue this conversation as far as this topic of discussion, one that will lead to the true emancipation of the African continent is concerned. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, you are following us on 4U television, your Pan-African television, and of course over the airways of FM 96.3, your Pan-African radio FM 96.3, and of course meanwhile, we reiterate that this day we have mentioned that about 60% of Africa's population is under the age of 25, and this youthful population is not just statistics for Africa, but can go a long way in, championing change across the African continent. Our guests reiterated so far that this potential in the young population of Africa, the youths can be able to play a role in redefining the economies of Africa. They can, the policymakers within the context can go a long way in reshaping or revamping the education system, so we have changes across Africa while Africa reclaims its economic destiny. We shall be picking up this conversation while we highlight that African pundits on numerous occasions have said that the youthful energy on the continent can be harnessed for it to champion change across the African continent. Meanwhile, hopefully our guests shall be joining us and we shall be able to pick up from where we stopped as far as this very important topic of today is concerned. Just to highlight that African leaders are championing or preparing Africa's young people to become job creators and not job seekers, and that's why we're having this conversation at a time where we're looking at a change in narrative, a change in mindset across the African continent. Just to reiterate, that our guests so far stated that it's important for those that are at the helm of Africa's leadership to go a long way in maintaining the African values, so we drive this change we're talking about. Now we just got indications that Mr. JARWOLO is back with us. You're welcome on board, sir.
Thank you.
It's good to have you back. Just to pick up from where we stopped, I was asking, how can young people across the continent of Africa utilize digital tools and technology in harnessing the potential, the untapped potential on the African continent to drive economic change?
I think young people are already using technology, but maybe not for economic change. True. I see that in Nigeria, you saw what young people did using social media to protest, and the protest was, and the government had to succumb. You saw what happened in Kenya. The young people protest against the government for tax, and they use social media. They also use it for election. But how do we shift now to economic empowerment? I think Nigeria is doing well in terms of how they are using social media for businesses. They are doing a lot of online business. I think also in Ghana, young people are using that, but it's not enough. I think there should be an opportunity that young people can be empowered in terms of how to be able to manage their businesses. So that managing business is different than just investing your money into something. How that business be sustainable? How do young people get together to open a factory and use social media to sell that product? I think there's a lot of things they can do, because this generation, I think the power of the generation is the generation of technology. And right now, if you even let the internet go for 1 hour, I don't know how the world would be like, especially for Africa. I was in Ghana one time, the internet went off. For a few hours, I couldn't even get an Uber to move around. So the power is there. but young people have to be trained how to use it for the right reason. In my country, Liberia, there are a lot of people on social media for what? Celebrate birthday parties, to face beat. People want to talk about themselves, and very little on how to use it for economic reasons. So I think that there should be some way to be able to build capacity that social media can be used in a more positive way for economic empowerment. I think that's only welcome. Maybe at the very universities in Africa, we need to start talking about now how do you use technology for economic empowerment, not just going and spending all the years in college learning all the different things. By the end of the day, just technology alone, if you don't know that, it means that you are not doing anything. We're not people using AR a lot in Liberia. They're using it for a lot of things. When people apply for the young political leaders in school, my friend was telling me they had to, more people use the AI to apply, and some of that was disqualified. So there's a lot of opportunity up there for young people using technology, but how do they use it for the right reason? That's what we need to focus on. Maybe have some program like this, get more young people who are at school in that area to be able to help all the young people to say, look, this is how I made it, this is how I succeeded, this is how we think we can make it. Young people across the continent should start to interact and start to link, share experiences, share best practices, and see how they can build trust in each other. We need to start traveling across Africa and appreciate Africa. Most of us appreciate traveling to America, traveling to UK. I was driving and I saw a lot of people yesterday to the embassy. I'm currently in Ghana, at the US embassy, and I'm like, why are they going? American? They want an American visa. I think we should appreciate traveling across Africa. I think we should appreciate our African culture, our African value. Traveling to Africa should be less expensive. I mean, traveling right in West Africa for me is so difficult. We need to open up in a way that I can leave from here and go to Cameroon, spend some time, go to different countries. Let the new generation start to talk and start to interact and start to learn from each other. Those are done better, like more Nigerian, very good at using social media. How do they help other people in Liberia, Ghana, Uganda, maybe Cameroon? How do we change ideas? How do we share best practices? That would be something that the young people on the continent need to start working towards. I think that would be good. And I also think that a change program across the continent for student change will be something better. I see that more young people want to go to Europe, go to school, but you can go you can come Liberia, you can go Ghana, you can go Sri Lanka, you can go different countries and learn and be able to make sure that you learn and also learn the cultural practices of those different countries going to. And gradually we can have a new generation of African leaders and business people and decision makers that be a young generation that will focus basically in making Africa a better place that they want to be.
Exactly, and of course we have to create a conducive environment so this young and thriving talents can be able to thrive in the context of Africa. Back to you. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Fabrice LENA back with us. Earlier on, at the start of this program, Mr. LENA, you stated that you're here to share your experience, to share your story. And your co-panelists highlighted just in line with, having an exchange program across Africa where numerous African talents, great minds like yourself can be able to share their vision, share their experiences for the African continent, while we continue this conversation of Africa having a borderless continent. Now, Mr. Fabrice LENA, I mentioned you're a political leader. From your perspective, given your experience, do you believe that the current political and economic structures within this context of Africa, let's borrow from Cameroon and spread that to the African continent, are they enabling or stifling youth entrepreneurship and innovation in Africa?
I mean, Sharon, you can bear with me that that's not the case in Cameroon. But of course, there are countries in the continent that are enabling young people to strive. True. By the laws they put in place as far as entrepreneurial actions are concerned, or the regulations, But when you look critically to the situation of countries, especially in the Central Africa sub-region, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Congo, Brazzaville, DR Congo, you find out that this is one of the sub-regions in the continent that it's still dragging the continent behind by the kind of leadership that is still in place. We still have the kind of leadership so tied to their colonial past, and people who are still within the accords of the treaties they signed in the colonial era and the post-independence arrangements for continuity of Western mastership in these countries. Of course, the continent is moving towards complete detachment from their masters, and as well affirmation and self-reliance. So we see this most often in the South African areas with countries like South Africa itself, Botswana, moving up to Tanzania, Kenya. They are trying, they are trying to detach themselves, Rwanda, from that colonial past. In West Africa, Burkina Faso and the Alliance of Sahel states are trying to put and set the pace. The Maghreb zone, of course, have been struggling for a very long time to say to the Westerners that they are a completely independent and unique people that do not need to be dictated what they need to do and how they need to implement their own policies, be it from the cultural perspective, linguistic perspective, economic policies, or even religious perspective. But these countries that are still having systemic obstructions to the emancipation of the youth and realization of youth priorities and frivolities and the kind of things that these young people need to do in order to emancipate the continent, we have but one simple solution. We have to push these leaders out of power. Cameroon is a typical example of that country that we need the African solidarity network of young people to push such leadership out, because corruption here is endemic, and the kind of political arrangement that is being practiced in this country as of now do not favor in any way the emancipation of the African continent. In fact, when I travel across the continent, just like my brother said, I really appreciate what I see in other countries. They're trying as much as possible to encourage circulation of the African countries. The last time that I was in East Africa, that was in Uganda. Yes, I went there for an activity, and the visa regulation there was flexible for me in particular, and a couple of other countries that I moved to, Rwanda. But you discover that we still have a lot of obstructions in terms of flight ticket, in terms of the air companies that circulate within the African country, in terms of road networks, in terms of transport networks, in as much as some sub-regions are consolidating themselves and then improving on the road network, the railway network, and other means of transport that could facilitate circulation of goods and services across the continent, there is still huge obstruction. Sometimes I cry for my sub-region, the Central Africa sub-region, for the simple fact that we are so behind when it comes to interconnection with other African sub-regions. Cameroon is having boundary with the largest market in Africa, but we are not benefiting from anything. We are having terrestrial maritime boundary with Nigeria with more than 200 million people. Nigeria is in need of rice. Nigeria is in need of vegetables. Nigeria is in need of a lot of things that Cameroon produce. But how on earth can you transport these things to Nigeria? The Nigeria have this market, and then Cameroon is producing some of these things, and Nigeria is rather importing rice from Thailand, from Malaysia, from Pakistan, whereas Cameroon have huge rice market and rice farms in Yagua, in Cameroon, in Dop, and so on and so forth. And you begin to find out, you ask yourself that, why is it that the president of Cameroon and Nigeria cannot sit down to define how they can exchange these products and not necessarily depending on another continent for it? And you see, Nigeria and Cameroon are doing businesses in a clandestine mode. Why not official? Is it because Nigeria is in ECOWAS and Cameroon is in CEMAC? So those are things that we are putting on the table, ask questions, interrogations. But I believe strongly that when our generation will take over leadership, both in Cameroon and in Nigeria, as we are fighting to see that this happens, these things are going to turn around, and we are going to change the policies. We are going to change the politics, and we are going to change the way these things should be done. And that is the perspective that we're inciting other fellow young people in the continent, across the continent, to think alike, to think as such. If there is any gerontocratic government in your country that is not permitting for us to realize the dreams of this generation, they have to go. We have to remove them by the most possible political means that are available at our disposal, while mitigating, any sort of violence or any sort of humanitarian crisis for our people. But we have to look for a way to send this kind of people away to go and rest, because the greatest obstruction we have in the continent is leaders that believe after 80 years and getting to 90 years, they still have the capacity to lead. They still think they are the only person who have to lead. I mean, they don't believe in retirement. They don't believe that they have to go and rest. So these are the kind of things that are dragging the continent behind. And we have to stand up. The world order now is presenting a lot of opportunities to Africa. The way Europe and America are having beefing among themselves is presenting opportunity for Africa. It just suffices that we have a lot of Diomaye Faye, a lot of Traoré, a lot of John Mahama, a lot of those progressive African leaders, Rajolina, a lot of those progressive African leaders who can come on board and say, okay, let's define a new agenda for the African continent. Let's strengthen the Africa free trade continental area. Let's see how to improve on this borderless stuff. Can we take the decisions now? There is a certain moment in history that it is the right moment to take a certain decision. So I wonder if African leaders are reading the map, are reading the feeling of the people of the continent. Because if they are reading the feeling of the people of the continent, this is the moment to take those radical decisions. This is the moment to take some of those progressive decisions. If we are talking about Agenda 2063, this is the time to define the base for it. This is the time to make sure that Africa has its own place, in the so-called United Nations Security Council and all the places where we have been marginalized. So I think we have a lot. And I'll be looking forward to connecting with my brother of Liberia so that we can, exchange ideas and see how to improve upon these ideas we are sharing with fellow people that are watching this program.
Exactly. I'll be staying with you, Mr. LENA. You said a lot of points that drew my attention. You cited the fact that we have numerous countries within Central Africa that I think they are still behind because of the currency. Now, I'm asking this question from your perspective as an entrepreneur. Now, given you're in this milieu, this economic milieu, from your perspective, do you think youths do have a role to play as far as eradicating the franc CFA from the African continent, so Africa can be fully emancipated as far as, economic development, growth and development is concerned?
Of course, Sharon. Yeah, young people can do something. And what young people can do is in the numbers they have. Young people are having the largest population base, both in Central Africa sub-region or in all the African countries that are still using the franc CFA. We can't be in 2025 and our currency is still minted and decided upon in another country out of our continent. This is unacceptable. This is not right. And I think that it just suffices for young people to be well informed, to be well educated, to be well trained, to be nurtured about the ideas of currency transfer and ownership back to us and managed by our own governments. But there is a discrepancy. I mean, there is a gap between the understanding of these problems and their solutions from the perspective of the young people and the governments that are in power. Because the governments that are in power, since they don't care, they are just there to wind the time, and then for the few decades they have to leave, just do what they're gonna do. That's why they don't care much about pushing this agenda. Young people are doing it in the form of advocacy. They are simply advocating, but they don't have the pen to take the decision and say, hey guys, it's time for us to decide the kind of currency we will use in our country. But then what the young people have as a tool is the capacity to push out those who are unwilling to make these reforms and replace them with those who are willing to make these reforms. And that's why I insist so much on political consciousness, identification of the right political leaders who have the right nationalist ideology, the right policies, the right institutional reforms, and then the Confederal African agenda that should take over from the political leadership. Unfortunately, in the history of human existence, it's only politicians that have to manage countries. And it is only this category of people that have the capacity to take these kind of decisions. And therefore, what the young people need to do is to look for a way, the best political means, the best non-violent political means to replace these old guys with the new generation leaders that will be able to achieve these goals. In 2025, Cameroonians have the opportunity to choose a new leader, and that is in the next 5 months. That's in October 2025. And of course, young people have the capacity to say no to the old and redundant leadership that has not been productive, and therefore elect a new leadership that could reflect the aspirations of the young people of Cameroon, the Central Africa sub-region, and the African continent.
Yeah, Fabrice LENA, a political leader and an entrepreneur who is partaking in the conversation from here at Cameroon. Meanwhile, we just got indications that another guest that just joined us, HANSON, GONSIA, BLAYON, you're joining us in your capacity as a communications expert all the way from Liberia. You're welcome on board.
Thank you, and I'm honored to be a part of this platform along with my guests, along with my executive director, Mr. Eddie Jaro. Thanks for the invitation.
It's a pleasure. I'll be coming back to you, but I would like to take the opinion of Mr. JARWOLO. Now, earlier on, you cited in one of your responses that security in one way or the other could be impeding this progress we want to see across Africa in terms of economic growth and development, where we're talking about economic freedom on the African continent. How can those in power, those that are at the forefront, the leaders, be the private sector, otherwise go a long way in, moving past some of these challenges that are occurring on the African continent to ensure that Africa is able to thrive economically?
Thank you, and I like the position of my friend. And I think we're resonating very well on developing a new generation leader for Africa. And in terms of security, it's just a leadership or a government that respects the rule of law. If the government respects the rule of law, there will be security. Where there's security, there will be economic growth because people will want to invest their money. Nobody wants to invest their money into an area that is not safe, that don't have a security. So I think that's a big issue. And he talked about Agenda 2063, the Africa will want. If you look at that agenda, there are a lot of positive things, but who's driving it? They have been driving by people who are 70 and 80 years old. And you get to the 80 years from now, and you have a whole generation driving the Africa will want with very little contribution for the younger generation. So I think we need to walk the talk that what we actually want for Africa should be driven by a generation that will benefit from that agenda we're talking about. We have the Africa Development Bank. The Africa Development Bank is there. What is it doing for young people? How are they building the capacity of young people to ensure that the Africa development one is driven by this generation of young people who are competent, qualified, and have the ability and experience to get it done? So these are processes that the young people have to be at the forefront. Not that we lack competent young people. No, we have qualified, very experienced, very passionate, committed young people in Africa, but they are being sitting on the side because they don't want to get in politics. They feel that politics are dead again. Because people have made politics look like a dead game. Because 80% of people who come to politics can't steal, can't get what they want to get. And there are leaders in Africa who believe that Africa belongs to them. They form a court, they form an association of old folks who protect each other. When a regulation, they don't go nowhere because they have control of the judiciary system. So security is number one. And the security basically it should be there to protect. It shouldn't be there to harm anybody. Most of the time we see young people get angry and jump on the street for the dissatisfaction. You see the security come on the street and beat them. And most of the young people are also being paid by older generation to go on the street to cause problems. But I think the security of Africa is very important for economic growth. And I want to come back, DR Congo. If you read about DR Congo, they should be one of the richest countries in Africa.
True.
But look at the number of war infractions are there. And all the drama, all the gold, all the resources they take away going. They go to a different country where that people keep dying for more than 30 years.
And they're multinational companies.
Yeah, so Africa need to be very serious about the African Union Security Council, if they have one, how to be sincere across the different areas, make sure that leaders are accountable to the people, the rule of law is respected across the nation, opposition politicians should not be arrested and beaten and put in jail, and nobody speaks for them. The intimidation gets too much. So to extent that some country is owned by few elected officials and nobody there to say anything. So it will fear a lot of people how to leave the country on political asylum because they don't have the space to say anything in their own country. I think that's wrong. And I want to conclude that young people have the number. They can determine any leader in any country in Africa. The young people have the number. They are the voters. They are the mobilizers. They are the campaigners. They can determine whatever Africa will want. When they use that knowledge, they scale the number to get the right people with a record of success. In that way, there will be a better Africa that everybody wants to live in peace. Or else, we will keep talking. And I mean, I started this job 20 years ago. I was like you. I was young. I thought everything would change. I had done everything in my country. But for one election to another election, the thief continue to win election. And what the masses suffer.
And that lies, it just continues the fact that we need more of action rather than words on the African continent. Africans, this message is for you. We should focus on driving change rather than just, laying down policies for the African continent. Back to you, HANSON, you listened to your co-panelists, and of course, they started a lot of powerful points, giving you just joining the conversation. There's been this conversation that has been ongoing about Africans, preserving or adding value to their resources. Africans efficiently taking part in narrative change across the African continent. Now, my question is, there's been this issue across Africa where it's often said that the young people often or less have access to finance and capital for their business ideas, to drive this economic change across Africa. But then, given you're a young person on the African continent, how can government as well as the private sector, better support youth-led economic initiatives so it leads to the economic emancipation of the African continent?
So thank you, and I think I'll listen to my boss and other co-panelists. So what I think is, the first thing we have to understand is Africa is at a crossroad, like many other people say this. And with the youthful populations, with growth and development, according to UNESCO statistics of 2023, there are 226 million individuals aged 15 to 24, representing 19% of the total populations. So to the questions, with 70% of young people under the age of 30, the potential innovation for entrepreneurship is very good. But again, it all comes to the issue of governance structure. Like someone said, entrepreneurship and innovation. Young people have a lot of businesses. But again, are the businesses flourishing? Is there resources that help as a remedy to boost the business of young people? So you find similar challenges across the continent with young people. But it equally boils down to politics, to government subsidies, to youth businesses that will boost economic, that will help young people to be resilient. Or else, the politicians, they want to empower young people to be involved in the political parties, to be chanting battle cry, not to be independent, but to be slavery of the mindset, to keep being around them, to hold you and not to make you a professional person or an independent person. But if young people are given the opportunity, they have created business and the jobs, and they are given the opportunity, the resources, that they can be integrated into the economy, that they can be self-reliant and improve the livelihood of people, we stand a great chance at even boosting the economy of Africa. But again, how many policies are on the board that says that when young person have a company, there should be a contract given to that young person that will help to even expound his level of capital. But instead, we go out of the country and get expert. We have the expert right in the same country. When the young people themselves go to school and have the education, they are the national. But yet then we go out to get experts. How do we expect young people to be a driving part of the economy? I think there's a total narrative of Africa. And if we have to redress this, we have to look within and develop what we have. So like my boss said, these things is something that people just say it, but they have a lot of laws and policies. But how effective it is that young people can be the actual change. It's true, the data is right, but then See how the unemployment rate is very high. See the level of politics and politicians. There's a lot of old people still in parliament. Even young people who come around, they still start to sabotage them. So I think a new holistic approach that not just young people, but this issue of avenue have to be created so that even subsidies and capital can be given to young people to contribute to this growth of economy that we're speaking about.
Now, I'll be staying with you, giving just join the conversation. Now, both panelists had mentioned earlier on that African youths don't feel like they are on the decision table. Now, from your perspective, what will it need? Like, do you think African youths say they are seated on the decision making table on the African continent? They can drive this change, because that is the perspective the other panelists have. So what is needed to get African youth on that decision-making table?
So in order for African youth to be felt, there should be an investment and skills development. Government should prioritize education. Young people should be empowered with education. And there are programs that will be given to them. They are exposures as well. So being on the decision table is not just you having me as an office assistant, but me giving me opportunity to run for elections, to win, supporting me, to even get at the level of parliament. Young people are not there. How many young people around Africa you see that into influential position in Africa? They are very few. So in order for young people to be at the decision table, they should be supported. That we have to take the issue of the God fellowship, where if you don't believe in me as a young person, I can't win elections. I think it's totally, we should get it out. Let everyone have the priority, to get at the table and make decisions. There's a need of even representation of young people in parliament. Even if they're not elected, let it be a part of say, oh, we have one representation for young person, from people with disabled, PWD, people with this, people with different challenges. Then let them have a representation in parliament. Of such, it is not. I don't really see it, and it's for our country. It's very rare. It's not happening either. But the politician instead use us as a weapon, as a tools. To run the propaganda on social media, to hold their bags, to charm the backdrop. But when it comes to the decision, we are outside and they are in. And once they come outside, they don't tell what's happened there. At the end, we see there's a massive corruption. You see, young people are at the rampant page of a lot of things. In terms of violence, we young people are at the forefront. We the one that can throw the stone. You don't see the politicians too. But the question is why? It is because the message that they gave us, we are not there to understand what is the actual problem, but instead we listen to the narrative. So people who are running initiatives and programs that help enlighten us, they see them as enemy because they are educating us, telling us this is what is right and what this is doing is wrong. So in return, they see people who run programs that help young people to be actual agents. They see you as enemy of the state. But the truth is, young people are excluded. We are not part. Like people say the national cake. We are not part. We are outside.
And of course, it's time for young people to actively get engaged in matters of the African continent, get to the decision-making table. Back to you, Mr. LENA. You listened to your co-panelists, and you mentioned earlier on that youths are more and more getting involved in, reshaping or shaping the agenda across the African continent. You went in line in citing the AU's Agenda 2063. Now, my question is, how did youth voices, because some time ago we saw when youth leaders or youth activists across took onto the streets of Kenya to protest about living conditions, to protest against the finance bill and others in the East African country. We equally saw a similar case, but this time around it was related to the mines in Ghana. How did youth voices move from protest to policy, from being heard to shaping agendas across the continent of Africa? Mr. LENA, can you hear me?
Young people across the African continent have the capacity to influence policies of governments in place. The protests in Kenya for review of the financial bill under President Ruto was, of course, very successful. It was successful because he came on to tell the young people that, well, my cabinet and myself have thought deep of your grievances, and we think we will withdraw from pushing through that financial bill. That's the power of young people, and that's what we want to see. For policies and laws that are disfavorable to young people, because your only power is in the streets. Because sometimes when you go through the ballot boxes and these institutions are controlled by the leadership, they can appoint and fire anybody they think is cooperating or not cooperating with them based on their own interests, and choosing those who satisfy their whims and caprices. It makes it difficult for whatever thing that the youth want to ask by petition, by simple advocacy papers, by TV TV statements, press statements. You know, sometimes those means are good, but they are weak, because these leaders, if you don't do something that actually touch their interest, that affects them directly, they are not going to change anything to your favor. And that's why the youth in Kenya understood that if we're just going to go to TV and tell President Ruto we are not comfortable, we are not happy with this financial bill, the parliament is going to go ahead with this, given that his party and his coalition are having the majority. But they knew that if they are going to go to the street and protest, and some people lost their lives, some were wounded, it was a confrontation in the form of a peaceful manifestation, and then the government understood that, hey, these young people mean business, and we can't joke with their feelings. It might turn to something else. We might lose our power. They might take control. Of course, young people's protests in so many countries have led to collapse of governments. From Sudan to the fall of Omar al-Bashir, it was a similar situation with increase in the price of bread, which is like a basic morning breakfast for majority of the population of this country. You know, to the period of the Arab Spring that we all knew how it ended, with the downfall of so many governments in the Maghreb zone, to the 2014 manifestations against Blaise Compaoré by the youth-led movement of Ballet Citoyen. You know, so these leaders sometimes understand that when the voices of young people is not to the extent that it affects their political position and their power, they will not do anything. But when it starts indicating or showing signals of bringing them down, they will quickly reverse whatever decision they wanted to take. So in a nutshell, youths have enormous force to enforce their own decisions through several means. But the most sustainable means to do this, is to replace these people who are not doing what we want with those who are doing what we want. But we have to put it in the back of our mind that every government must have a contract. That's why the idea of social contract came about. There must be some sort of rules that is established between the person we entrust the leadership of the country with and those that are anticipating and waiting for reforms. Without such contracts, well established in the form of a rigid constitution that does not allow for flexibility of the president to do whatever thing he or she wants, especially in Francophone countries, French-speaking countries, then the presidents are still going to drive the people and the country to their own direction, because the president is at the driving seat of the car that is carrying a nation. And as such, you don't have to give the person the freedom to drive at any speed that they want. We must tell the person, at this place you drive at this speed, at that place you drive at this speed. And this is because we are the majority. And we have to be those, like my fellow young comrades of Liberia said, We have to be in the decision-making places. We have to be in that house, in that parliament, in that government, not just some few young people chosen randomly to portray the issue of youthful inclusivity and then gender inclusivity, but of course, impactful, meaningful, critical youths by means of election or appointment into these places that could really, indeed, shape how we see our countries and our continent.
Well, thank you so much. That was a very, impactful response. And now back to you, Mr. JARWOLO. You listened to, Mr. FABRICE, LENA, as well as HANSON, BLAYON. In a globalized world, how do we ensure that Africa, doesn't export its young talents? You mentioned earlier on that we have this brain drain that's been noticed across the African continent, In a bid to reduce this aspect, how can we ensure that we retain the young minds, the great minds on the African continent, reward them? So at the end of the day, we have more successful models and successful stories of youth-driven economic transformation on the continent of Africa.
Thank you very much. I think one of the first things we need to do is the mindset. Many young people believe that the only way you can make it is to leave for Africa and go to Europe or go to America before you can make it. It's not true.
Exactly.
I mean, you can make it right in Africa. We need to develop a mindset that we can try something. Try. You can't sit and keep waiting that it will come to us as a gift. No, it got to be something we have to fight for. I think it's time for the African youth to stand up for what they want. If they stand up for what they want, and the patriotic and the nationalistic and the sincere about what they want, they can get it. I mean, you can't have a continent where the young people are so much, and the opportunity for young people are so limited because few old people feel that it's not their time. When will be their time? When will you give them that time? So the young people have to start to work together as a team. I like the fact that we need to cut across the continent, find the best, and see how we can start working together. We shouldn't be waiting for the old people to organize programs before we participate. We can't be waiting for the old people to the godfathership in other countries get on the godfather. You got to have an older person with money to support you before you get into politics. No, we need young people that will say we will start to organize our community. We'll start to set our idea. We'll start to identify those people that can make it and get them. Support them to get to power. And when they get to power, let them be that light that can make a change. And you can better set a case. I think the young people in Africa, even when you have the opportunity to go up there and meet it, it's good that you come by and see how you can start something and make a name for yourself on the continent. And just go in and live it. All young people are now seeing the opportunity to work in government because they are not members of the political party. When you are the opposition, you don't have the space. And the winner take all. So if you're one party, one political party is in power for 18 years, you're a young person at the age of 20 plus 18 years, where you going to? So they make it so difficult that more young people get frustrated. They have to leave the continent. We have to make sure that you find another way to survive. When I started with the institution, I was in college when I founded this organization. And a lot of people tell you what I'm possible, it couldn't work. I come from a very poor family. I mean, I'm almost like a street kid during the war. When I decided to put this organization together, a lot of people thought it was not possible. Today, it has been globally recognized. Besides the young political leaders in school, the partner for democratic development, we have a lot of innovative programs that are just building young people. If you go to Liberia, it's like building a movement of young people who are not challenging the state of code, who are not seeing and saying that I can make it. And they are gradually getting there. They are winning seats at the different community level. If you go to the different universities in Liberia, all the student leaders are either women or the deputy vice president is either a woman, and they came from the young political leadership school. Today we have like 6 young ministers who went through the young political leadership school. And so we're building a real movement across the country, and it's just a matter of time that you see a change to reset Liberia and make it better. And we want other young people across the continent to start to work, start to put the idea together, start to prepare yourself for what you want to do. You cannot shy away from what you want. You need to put up what you want and believe into it and work towards it, and you get it done. There's no magic. What you see in Africa, they see sand, they see water, they see river. If you go to Europe, you see it. It's just a mindset that people are committed to making a country different and make it different. Some people live and they go to Europe, America, they're not making it, but it's shouldn't come out because The expectation there is not working. I think we can stay in Africa and make it better. And with what you're doing, I mean, I think you should continue doing this. Connect the different Africans. I mean, next time get people from Ghana. And I want you to attend a young political leadership school because you have people from all over Africa they can be connected to. And we can be able to sit on this platform and find a way to just build a network of movement that can change Africa with young people who are passionate, who are committed, who have the experience, who want to make Africa a better place for everybody to live. And I think that is possible, and we believe it. And I really appreciate my friend from Cameroon, the wonderful work you're doing. I think we will connect very well. We can do a lot to change the system by just properly mentoring young people. I think mentorship is something that we need to do. Those who also have the opportunity to be up there, we need to start to mentor a new generation, guide them in the right direction. We need internship program, giving young people the chance to go on internship program and learn new skills and new talent and be able to prepare themselves. We don't want young people to take over and you take over without any experience. Then you feel and say, we tell you, young people don't have no idea. So young people who want to be in politics, who want to be in leadership, how to start to find a way to learn. You can do a lot of courses online. You can start organizing your communities. You can start to do a lot of work, putting your team together. Getting involved into mentorship program, getting involved into internship program, and gradually you have a better skill to lead, and you'll be surprised one day you see yourself up there making a difference. But thank you for the wonderful work you're doing. I think that we can do a lot by making sure that young people who stay in Africa are doing better. If young people who stay in Africa are not doing better, how will you encourage other people to come by? If young people leaving and going, and they see that young people are stay doing better, they will want to come by. But if they go and spend 4 or 5 years in Brussels or France or Germany or America and they live better, and those of us who stay in Africa continue to suffer and cry, then there's no need for them to come back. So we need to start using our skills, our knowledge, the opportunity we have to make a difference, to motivate other people. Say, I think I have to go back to Africa. I see my friends doing better. Let me go there and start something. I think also entrepreneurship at a very little level, you don't need to have $1 million to start. What little you have, start to do something. Try to look at other people who are successful entrepreneurs and see how you can learn from them and start doing something. I think gradually we can get there. But this generation have the opportunity right now with technology to go to election, to win, and to lead. I think it's possible.
Indeed, with a change of mindset, gradually but surely Africa can get to that point where it intends to be. We're gradually coming to the end, but I have 2 last questions before we culminate today's edition. I'll take HANSON at this point. HANSON, you listen to the other co-panelists. From your perspective, if you could implement as a young leader just one bold policy, you know, tomorrow that could boost this youth power for economic freedom across Africa, what is that going to be? Please, in 2 minutes, so we work on time.
Okay. So thank you. So firstly, young people in Africa, we are agents of change, and we drive political reform and social progress. And one of the policy that will help, we need in Africa, we need universal youth empowerment programs. At the level of the AU, they have the youth internship programs, wherein they recruit young people every year. And I was opportunity to be one of the persons that got accepted. But guess what? In these programs, before the admitting process is very long. Not really a lot of young people get through the process. And with a bold policy at the level of a country, we need young people who are very vibrant and willing to be a part of the change. And that comes with education. Because if you are not educated, and you don't have the mindset, if you don't distinguish right and wrong, the issue of ignorance is a major thing that is also affecting our generations. You know, most people complain that we're not doing this, they're not doing that. But again, if you are not going to school, how are you? So in other words, I think a policy is universal youth empowerment program that will be initiated that will guarantee access to quality education for young people, include not just university level, but vocational entrepreneurship support for all young people, fostering skills of job creations across Africa. That would build an inclusive young people that will drive economic reforms, that will drive social reforms. again, we are used more for political reforms, getting to protest, doing this, that. But after the protest, what happens? What happened to our future? I mean, a lot of young people go to Europe, but the thing is, if you are in Europe and if you still seeing in Africa that nothing is changing, you are not going to come back. There is nothing to do, because wherever you think about, you think that there is poverty, there is hunger, there is limited access to opportunity, there is no job for you in return. So at the end result, you see the continent continues to deplete in level of potential of young people. But I tell you, young people are very powerful, and those people who are educated, those of us that are driving towards education, social change, and environmental activism and everything, we have to stand up. We have to have a belief system that this is what we want, this is what we work, and they have a purpose. And thank you for the platform. I think such a platform allows young people like us and even the older people to have a knowledge sharing ideas that we can help to cultivate a new breed of generation. Because Africa is at the point where we need to drive it. The politician cannot, they can make the decision, but we need to make our way in the cycle that we will be your influential change makers. Not just in politics, but in every sector that will cooperate to make a better continent. So thank you so much, and I look forward to always this invite. And I think congratulations, I see you were accepted for the YPLS. My executive director, Mr. Eddie Jaro, I think he mentions that, but I would say you were accepted. Congratulations. And it's a gathering where 100 young people from around Africa gather, every year in Liberia, to go through series of intensive training, from political campaign to emotional intelligence to campaign strategies, a whole lot of things that will help young people. And my executive director, Mr. Eddie Jaro, have been doing a whole lot in rebranding, reintegrating young people. And as a result, the success story is so huge. And we want one of these days we look forward to having a whole pound of platform of young people from diverse African countries that we can dialogue and have a cross ideas to see what's happening in your country and what's not happening, and not to have a lesson learned section. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you. Look forward to having more of this conversation that young people can be an active participant of democratic reform. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. Before I give the floor now to Mr. Fabrice LENA, I'll just reiterate that the two previous speakers were Mr. Eddie JARWOLO, the president of NAMOD Partners for Democratic Development and executive director of the Young Political Leadership School Africa in Liberia. We equally had HANSON, GONSIA, BLAYON communication expert. Now, to culminate to this conversation around, youth power being the catalyst for economic freedom on the African continent. Mr. Fabrice LENA, you've listened to your co-panelists, and at the end of the day, where we leave from today's conversation, we'll have at the back of our mind that it is a time for Africans, especially the young people, to change their mindset and embrace change, so they can be able to drive, change the narrative across the African continent. But you mentioned in one of your responses that the time is now for Africa to change. So what is the way forward for the African continent in just some 1 minute 30, so we can be able to, draw down the curtains of this edition?
Yeah, thank you very much. The way forward for the youths of this continent is collective action. Collective action. No one can do it alone. No matter how insightful you are, if you want to go fast, then you have to go alone. But if we have to go far as a continent, then we have to go as a team. We need to build teams, sub-regional teams, and merge, interconnect, interrelate, build ideas, find commonalities in our ideas, and then see how we could keep on nurturing these ideas. The continuity of the conversation, the shaping of the ideas that come in a mind over and always, all the time, will make it for us to have a very clear roadmap of where we are heading to. Because the very moment laziness set in, backsliding set in, discouragement set in, pessimism set in, we will not be able to accomplish anything. But if we keep on working on what can work for us, what we can do for the moment, what we can actually achieve within our capacity and within the scope of our means, I bet you, little by little, country by country, sub-region by sub-region, we will be able to give Mother Africa the best image in the next, 3 to 4 decades. Agenda 2063 will be a reality if our generation decides to put it all straight right now by doing just the little things we are doing, just like my brother in Liberia with a political school for young people, doing that, giving his trainings, and myself at the level of Cameroon, we do Cameroon Youth Conversation Forum with Lola Leadership Foundation, which of course I'm the founder and CEO. At the continental level, we have the Africa Youth Conversation Forum, and also we have the AYC, the Africa Youth Congress. So in these little initiatives, trying to do what we can do at our own level, cherishing the continent, moving from country to country, preaching the gospel of Mother Africa, staying within our means and just doing the necessary, while checking the politics, influencing the politics, and pushing those we think are best to lead us to the position of power. We will be able to achieve a lot of things. So that's my modest contribution and the call for action that I can give right now to those that are following us and beyond.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fabrice Lena. You join us in your capacity as an entrepreneur and a political leader. You are the founder of Now Wa Future, movement in Cameroon. Thank you so much, sirs, for taking our time to join me on today's edition of Talking Point.
Thank you so much.
Meanwhile, it's Sanders notes that we shall be drawing down the curtains of today's edition of Talking Point over your Pan-African channel for you, Media Africa. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And it's always a pleasure to be in your company, ladies and gentlemen, as we edify the African population on the way forward for Africa. Meanwhile, we believe you learned a lot from today's conversation. Until the next rendezvous, do have a great day in company of our numerous programs.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My people of Liberia, I would like to connect.